they're all HDR10, same feed. All right, the G3 is too dark, slightly, but at 52, I think if I raise it any more, it'd be a bit too inaccurate. The Fall of the House of Usher, very popular on Netflix. This is my new reference near black shadow detail streaming content. So we're going to talk about how these TVs compare. And yes, they are all different. And specifically, we're going to see HDR10, how it compares on all three, and then HDR10 versus Dolby Vision on the Sony and the G3. And it is different. And even the internal app is slightly different. All right. Now, of course, before we start, guess what's coming up next? Of course, it is our sponsor.
And today's video is brought to you by Whokeys.
Trying to build a PC on a budget but don't know where to buy your Windows 10 software on the cheap? Whokeys to the rescue.
Use my code SF20 and immediate discount. At the bottom of this order where it says code card, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from Whokeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can download a copy of Windows 11 Pro with my discount code SF20 and bam.
So let's introduce the TVs, all the settings, and yes, I've updated the firmware, but I'll go over which firmware I have as well. So on the left is the S95C, in the middle is the A95L and the G3. The S95C is on firmware 1220, that's the most current one. A95L is on the most current firmware that I update, and the G3 on its most current firmware 3.20.13. We're going to start with HDR10 on all three TVs. And so let's go over the settings real quick. So we'll be in filmmaker mode, most accurate mode on the S95C. Everything has been calibrated on the S95C. HDR tone mapping is on static, that is its most accurate mode. And of course, the color space is custom at BT 2020. Next up is the Sony. It is on Gradation Preferred HDR10 and Professional, that is its most accurate mode. Yep, brightness is on maximum. Everything is default out of the box. And lastly, we have the LG G3 filmmaker mode that's also calibrated. The only TV that's not calibrated is, again, the Sony A95L. Black levels at 50, dynamic tone mapping is off. Here we go. Okay. Now, as you can see right off the bat, the G3 feels a touch crushed in some areas, but I did turn up the ISO to make sure you see that, but it's not that obvious really. I mean, it is slightly darker than both the S95C and the A95L, but it's not terribly so. And if we turn on dynamic tone mapping, and this is where it comes in. This only happens in filmmaker mode. In Cinema Home, if you turn on dynamic tone mapping, it brightens the whole scene. In cinema, it only brightens that darkest area. So I'll just show you real quick. Yeah, sorry for the overexposure, but I'm going to turn on dynamic tone mapping. Okay, dynamic tone mapping is now on. You see, it does lighten it up a little, but not too much. In Cinema Home, the whole scene is just way too bright. So I'm going to leave it on so you guys can see the differences. And this is something that you guys have to think about. Even though my TV is calibrated, the G3, in this scene, dynamic tone mapping on makes it closer to the S95C. Is the Sony still over brightening near black and QD OLED? Well, let's see. This next scene will tell the tale. So on the Sony, I'll turn up the exposure just a bit more here. Right here, if you compare the differences right there, so look at that and tell me that's where you're going to see the Sony is just a touch. It's not crazy, and I think it's acceptable. I mean, if you are really wanting perfect luminance near black, you're going to have to get it calibrated. But even to the left of that, right, the board coming out from the left, the Sony is slightly lifted compared to the G3. Now the G3, you could say, well, maybe it's slightly crushed, maybe not. But the question is it too much for you guys? It's not that bad, right? Robert says, Sony, left side of the porch looks better details. Others are too dark. So Robert, this is a question for all of you. If the creator wants it to be too dark, then it is what it is, right? However, if you're annoyed by the darkness and you want to see more detail, of course, you could always raise the black. So we'll use the G3 as an example. If I raise it to a setting of 52 black level, right? Many of you could do this on your own C2 or C3. Dynamic tone mapping is on, but now at 52, now No, it's overexposed. So let me take the exposure down to what would be closer to what you guys see. Which is more pleasant, right? The G3 at a black level 52, there's a little bit more detail. And remember, the creator's intent is what is on the S95C. So something to think about. I will leave the black level at 52 dynamic tone mapping on the G3. So those is just jump in, don't complain. Oh my gosh, my G3 looks nothing like this. It can be adjusted back. You turn off dynamic tone mapping, you bring black level down to 50, and then the G3 becomes a bit too dark. Just something to think about. So Mozart says, that's the thing Sony has relied on as an excuse for over-brightening. Shadow detail for a long time. People see more details, they assume it's better. That's right. It's so isn't this like Samsung, right? Samsung appeals to vibrancy, Sony appeals to shadow detail, but neither are necessarily creators' intent. And classy. G3 with DTM on uses the 20,000 zones to manipulate the entire image. It'll darken and brighten certain areas to increase perceived contrast. It's not accurate, but it may be someone's preference. And that's kind of what we're here, because this is a very difficult set of scenes. The fall of the house of Usher, right? From the minute he gets out of that taxi at the beginning to this point, it is very dark. And if you're in a bright room, you're going to see nothing, my friends. To better match the HX310, increase shutter detail to +1. Let's do that. Let's bring black level to +1. Now, the S95C is at shadow +1. This is great. The Sony and the S95C are very similar, and the G3 at a black level of 52 is close. I wouldn't go up to 53. I think that really raises it too much. And this next scene should also be pretty good. All three are very similar. What do you guys think now? With these adjustments made, now the G3 is too dark. Well, the black level is at 52. If I bring dynamic tone mapping up, it might be too bright. If you're out of the box, you're going to have to play with dynamic tone mapping and the black level. You're going to have to tune it to taste. You could take the black level down to 51. Actually, let's do that. What is your preference? Because you have nothing to compare it to. I say tune it to what you feel is watchable, because the goal of the content creator is for you to watch, not for you to be annoyed, right? So the black level is now 51. Now, what do you guys think? And I think this is a good compromise for the G3. What type of Netflix subscription is this, 4K or normal? It is the top tier of Netflix. Now remember though, just because it's premium tier does not mean you get 4K all the time. Depending on how many people is watching any show at any given time, they may drop down to HD. They may drop down to 1080p, or the 4K may be dropped down. So it's not always 4K, even though it's supposed to be. Classy says, you can see where the dynamic tone mapping on the G3 makes dark areas darker and bright areas brighter, and it isn't accurate. And this is a good scene because there's like a variety of things to look at. So here you can see that the G3 is slightly lifted because dynamic tone mapping is on and black level is at 51. So once again, let's take dynamic tone mapping off for those who might want to leave it off. Dynamic tone mapping is off, but it's preference. Without a reference monitor, you do not know what creator's intent is. We're going to go into Dolby Vision and compare that. And for those wondering, what if you put this in Cinema Home? Slightly brighter. It's a slight difference, right? And if you're wondering, okay, since we're having Cinema Home, what if we put the Samsung in active? What would happen? Just out of curiosity, right? Now, in a brighter room, this might make sense for you all. And this might be what you want because you cannot see a darn thing. Is this scene, as I'm seeing it, it's actually relatively dark still. So let me turn down the exposure just a touch. So now we have Dolby Vision Dark, which essentially looks like active on the S95C, and Cinema Home on the G3. Is it weirdly green? No, it's definitely a combination of my high ISO. As you increase the ISO on my camera, Lisa, it actually changes the color shift a bit because now they're focused on capturing light. So the best, the most color accurate is not what my camera is capturing. I'm trying to capture the luminance, not the color, right? Ignore any color shifts. I'm losing a lot of color when I captured this actually, because I'm trying just to get the exposure up. It's a very dark scene. This is the Sony's internal app. The Samsung is also in its internal app. It is now in static, and let's make the LG. Let's bring it back to cinema. G3 is a touch dark. Okay, so the problem with Dolby Vision on the G3 is I cannot play with dynamic tone mapping. So if I do raise the black level to 52, at 52, the G3, much more manageable, right? In Dolby Vision Dark. So for those of you who have the G3 or maybe the C3 and you found that Dolby Vision Dark is a bit too bright or too dark, play with black level. So on my G3, I found 52 to be fine. It actually gets it a bit more visible, the detail. And if the creator intends for you not to see this scene, well, it is what it is, right? Complain to the creator. Can you see Dolby Bright or Vivid? All right, let's try that with the Sony, because I think the Sony and Dolby Vision Bright might be fun. So let's do it. This is Sony and Dolby Vision Bright. This is Sony and Dolby Vision Vivid. You see the difference in the brightness? And since we're at it, let's put the G3 in. The G3 in Vivid is horrible. That's home. I think home is better than standard, and that's Vivid on the G3. I mean, that's interesting. Definitely different, and might as well let Samsung flex its muscles and let's put it in active and let me change my labels. Oh, I didn't even correct it. Now it's active.
That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Yes!
Okay, now.
Hit the like button. I'd much appreciate it. You're welcome, Lisa. I enjoy doing this. I figure if I'm going to explore it, I might as well explore it with you guys. So I have to say this. Oh, wait. In pause, it's flickering. I don't know if you guys see this, but my G3 is flickering while I have it in pause. So this is no bueno. It's probably because I have it on pause. So don't count it against the G3. And I think it's probably because it's in vivid mode even. And no flickering in Cinema Home. How about enabling Netflix calibrated mode? Yeah, it sucks. What are they calibrating to? I never use Netflix calibrated mode. It is way too dark. It is just, it's unwatchable. I'm sorry. Which TV has the best fine details? It is the A95L because they do add a sharpening algorithm that the other two TVs don't have. And it's not necessarily accurate, but for low bitrate content, for streaming content where you're like, I want the 3D pop, A95L has it. It raises specular highlights a touch, although inaccurate, I have to tell you. And it adds an extra sharpening. Both are not heavy-handed, so it is pleasant, but you have to know that. And if that's what you're looking for, Sony does it better than the other two TVs, which the Samsung doesn't do at all, nor the G3. They try to stick with accurate. Sony, you actually cannot even turn it off. All right, thank you everyone for coming by. Until next time, stop the FOMO.